Hello everyone, this is Gary of Backus Creative Imaging, and I wanted to cover in this video some tips about the record file format in this camera, the Panasonic GH5 II, as well as the record quality settings, and maybe how that relates to variable frame rate, and a few other things too. And unfortunately, not a lot of videos have been made about this camera, and this is a very nice upgrade from the Panasonic GH5. It's more like the GH5 perfected. And while there are higher end cameras available these days like the Panasonic GH6, for many people that camera just offers too much video features for what they need, and they would find themselves not really using those high-end features, so you're paying for something that you don't really need, while the GH5 II addresses a lot of the shortcomings of the GH5 and really makes it into a fantastic 4K video camera. So I'm going to go and cover some of these record settings here, and I hope that this can help you. So let's go and get started. So let's start with the record file format set to the MP4 container, and when you go to record quality, you can see there's only one page here and then just two options on the second page. And these modes are good, but if you want the most out of this camera, you would go ahead and switch your record file format to the MOV container. And it's going to ask you a high performance PC is required to play or edit, so yes, we can proceed. Now this camera has a 20 megapixel sensor, so as you can see, this would be nearly the full sensor readout. This is about 18 megapixel video in a 4:3 aspect ratio, and this is also of course 30 FPS and 420 10-bit, and long GOP would of course be long group of pictures, so it's obviously not all eye. It's going to require a bit of effort to decode that. Now this video is very high quality. You could use log with it, however it's very demanding and you would definitely need to create proxies. So while I like this, I barely use it myself. I like these 6K anamorphic modes. They produce great video, but I personally use most of my shots. I do not like Cinema 4K because I just don't like the aspect ratio. I like to use, especially I'm going to use a 2.35 cinematic aspect ratio in my final video. I prefer 16:9 video because I can crop in a little bit. I have a little bit more headroom on the bottom and the top if I need it. So I use the regular UHD 4K. I will use something like 4K 30p 422 10-bit. So this is your spatial resolution. That would be your frame rate, right? Progressive scan 422, that's your chroma subsampling, and then of course 10-bit and then long GOP. So there we go. I would use either 4K 30p 422 10-bit long GOP. You could use 4K 60 10-bit 420 long GOP. Now that's if you just want the 10-bit. If you want to have a little bit easier editing on your computer and you don't plan on using Vlog, then using 8-bit would be just fine. So like 4K 30 420 8-bit long GOP. Also of course the 24 FPS, right? There goes 4K 24 420 8-bit long GOP. Unless you're shooting Vlog on this camera and you want to be able to edit the footage without having to create proxies, you need to probably go and shoot with the 8-bit modes, and the 8-bit modes are great. So here goes 4K 60 8-bit. Now you can also of course, if you go to down here to my list, you can create your own list. So what you can do is you just go back into record quality, and let's say I primarily use 8-bit modes, right? So I use 4K 60 8-bit. I'm going to go and create my list, add to my list, and then I also shoot 4K 30, and then let's just say that I shoot 4K 24, and this is all 8-bit. So if I go to my list, I have 3 of the 4K modes that are only 8-bit. So we've got 60 FPS, 30 FPS, and 24 FPS. These would be the least taxing video modes on your computer in 4K using the MOV format. So keep in mind that this camera, the anti-aliasing filter has been removed, so technically moire patterns can exist. Now to solve that, you can use image area video pixel for pixel, and this will crop in to a 1:1 readout of the sensor. So here's pixel for pixel off, and then here's pixel for pixel on. See? So that is a 1:1 readout. So what this is doing is it's taking the 20 megapixel sensor and giving you a full high definition, roughly 2 megapixel crop of that sensor. It's about a 2.6x crop. Let's go to pixel for pixel. There it is. See? And at this point, there's no potential for moire artifacts because we're getting a 1:1 pixel readout. And keep in mind that this camera doesn't have an anti-aliasing filter, so that moire potential is definitely there if you're using if you're not using pixel for pixel and you're using the full sensor readout and you're using full HD. The potential for moire artifacts are there. So I would recommend to just go pixel for pixel and you'll get a very high quality video. Now another thing is that this option is also available in all of the other modes except the 6K mode. So what we can do is, if we're in say 4K 30, we can also crop in. So let's go and go to image quality of video or image area of video, pixel for pixel. Now we're cropped in about 1.3x, right? And then when we're in the full HD mode, we can now crop in about 2.6x with pixel for pixel. So when it comes to how demanding this is on your computer, you really are not going to get away from it too much. What I'd recommend doing is just building proxies. So using your video editing program of choice. So let's say I film or record in 4K 60 a lot. Let's say that's what you do. Just record in 4K 60. Use 10-bit if you're going to be using Vlog. However, if you're going to be using flat or natural or Cine D or Cine V, it's totally fine to use 4K 60 8-bit. Okay. And then you'll get better performance when you're trying to edit. However, if you do have to use 10-bit, then you're going to have a slowdown on your editing. You're going to have a slowdown on your computer. So if you have time, just create video proxies. That's basically all I can say, because 4K 60 10-bit, it's going to be a little bit demanding, but just create proxies if you have time. And if you don't, then if it doesn't matter, if you're not shooting in Vlog L, then just shoot with the 68-bit and you should be fine. You should also be aware that when you're shooting in this VFR mode in 1080p and you use the image area of video pixel for pixel, there is a limit on the frame rate that you can use in that pixel for pixel mode, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but let's just go ahead and try it out. So go to variable frame rate, go to 135. That is where it cuts out. Okay, so 135 is the maximum you can get using this sensor crop or 1:1 pixel readout. So the moment we go to say 150 frames per second, we can't use that anymore. So generally speaking, I would advise going beyond the 135 frames per second when you're in VFR shooting at 30 frames per second, because of the potential for moire artifacts. If the moire artifacts aren't going to appear, or you're shooting a situation where you won't really see them, or it doesn't bother you much, and getting that higher frame rate matters more to you, then it's fine. But just be aware that there is a cutoff point of 135 frames per second in 30 frames per second. And when you're shooting record quality of say full HD 24 FPS, that cutout is actually at 144 frames per second. So see, we can still use that 1:1 pixel readout, but the moment we go beyond 144 to 156, it's gone. So just keep that in mind. I prioritize that image quality, so I don't like the moire artifacts, so I just keep it at 144, and that's still a very respectable 16.7%. I use 4K 60 anamorphic 30 frames per second, 420 10-bit long GOP if I want to get the most, sharpness and everything and all that. And I'm still using my 2.35 cinematic aspect ratio, so I have the ability to move up and down the frame in post if necessary. Now, this is definitely the highest quality this camera can record, but it is very demanding to decode even on a very fast computer, so I don't really use this one. I tend to use 4K 30 or 4K 60 or 4K 24. These are all 10-bit. Again, I press this button here to get to my list, and I have 2 pages of options here. If I want to do the 6K modes, the full-on sensor readout, I got 30 frames per second and 24 frames per second. You can use Vlog with these. With my 4K 10-bit modes, I've got, again, it's 10-bit, so you can use Vlog with these. However, I do often just use 10-bit, and I use flat or natural or anything else because I don't mind getting that extra bit of color depth in there, because I create proxies most of the time anyway. Let's move on to full HD. We've got our full HD options. These are 10-bit all-I, so these are really high quality. If I intend on cropping in, so if I want to crop in here, then I can go and get a really high quality 4K video from this 1080p video, because it's all-I. I could use Video Enhance AI and upscale it to 4K. And then finally, I've got my full HD 8-bit modes, which is what I use with VFR. So I can go to, say, full HD 30 frames per second 8-bit, And if I want to change my VFR, I can just press my quick menu and go into here and then change my settings. However, you can also, of course, just do it in the menu over here. So there goes variable frame rate, and you can use this to change it. So that's really about it. I hope that this video helped you configure your GH5 Mark II camera a little bit better. So thanks for watching.